All right, my name is Andras Chair. I'm a senior analyst at Forrester Research. I cover identity and access management. And today's panel discussion is going to be a very interesting one. We have invited 7 of the most prominent players here in the industry to discuss where the future of federation is going, how interoperability is going to occur in the future. And we're going to, before I introduce our guests here, we are going to essentially divide this discussion today into 3 or maybe just 2 major parts. We're going to talk about the past and the present. And with that, what we had in mind with that is really talk about what has been done with these organizations, these protocols, these standards, and how people, vendors, and other parties are using these solutions. And then at the tail end of the session, we are going to talk about the future as to what the future holds, where things are going, why things are important, how the digital identities of the future will play together. So it is my pleasure to introduce our participants today. We have Dale Olds here, who represents the OSIS. Then we have Eve Maller, who represents the Concordia project. We have Trent Adams, who is the founder of the DataPortabily project. Who is a founder of the DataPortabily project. Yeah. We have Roger Sullivan, representing the Liberty Alliance. We have Eric Sachs, representing OAuth. We have Brian Kissel, OpenID Foundation. And we have Paul, right? Paul Trevithick, right at the end, the Information Card Foundation. So with that in mind, I have prepared a few questions, and would like to start out with my first question to Roger. Right? So we've been hearing a lot about interoperability. We've been hearing a lot about competing protocols. We've been hearing a lot about a lot of standards fighting in the open. What's behind all this? How are the vendors playing together? How is this thing going to pan out? Where are things going? What has been done?
Well, there's a pragmatic approach, and then there's I think, the rational approach. The pragmatic approach that many vendors have had to take, as well as some customers have had to take, is we'll figure it out, and we will create hooks because that's what customers want, right? So we will create, in effect, proprietary solutions that will interoperate with open standards. In the end, that's not where the industry needs to go. The industry needs to work together to harmonize these standards one against the other, and that's why, I mean, for instance, we were so pleased with the Kantara announcement this morning is that it provides that kind of opportunity for harmonization. A lot of the good work that Eve has done within the Concordia project has been toward harmonizing that Venn of identity. So there's both, as I say, a pragmatic approach where vendors and some customers are implementing solutions that they need in order to deliver products and services to their own particular markets. But the rational approach is this harmonization effort that I think all of us at the table are committed to do in one way or another.
Great, thank you. I have a question on interoperability. Eve, could you tell us about where we are with interoperability right now? What has happened in the past year around Project Concordia? What kind of use cases you define where things have been progressing?
Sure. So Concordia is one of a number of organizations concerned with interoperability when you are dealing with multiple protocols and technologies that were not initially designed to go together. And we heard this morning about OSIS actually doing interoperability testing against some of these solutions. Project Concordia last year at RSA held a workshop where we did some interop demos taking into account use cases specifically to marry SAML and WS Federation and SAML and info cards. And we picked those because they happened to be the lowest hanging fruit, things that people were, well, lowest hanging, they were top of mind for people. And what we discovered was, you know, there weren't too many surprises, but I think where we learned the most was around this notion of how you can ask for a certain type or strength of authentication and how you can successfully get that back through doing a remote authentication in a single sign-on way. So I'd say where we are now is a much greater understanding of the difficulties and the impedance mismatches between a SAML approach, a WS-Fed approach, and an InfoCard approach of how you actually achieve that asking for and getting certain kinds of authentication. And by the way, I think later today we'll have more information coming out of Project Concordia on how you marry SAML and OpenID on that exact same front.
Okay, great. Talking about OpenID, Brian, can you help us understand where we've been with OpenID? Give us any examples as to how people have used it. Sure. Just give us some detailed use case descriptions and parties descriptions as to where things have been progressing.
Sure. For those of you who know OpenID, it really started out with a much more narrowly defined use case, really focusing on user-generated content for blogs and wikis and such. And so what we find is the relying parties that are looking to adopt OpenID are really trying to improve registration conversion rates and login success rates. And they're starting to achieve that now. As you've seen on the OpenID Foundation's website, we're now up over 40,000 websites that are using OpenID. And the primary reason they're using it today is for just that benefit, to get more registered users and to facilitate login. But what's now happening with some of the extensions of OpenID and other complementary technologies like OAuth that Eric will talk about is we're offering those very same sites and the users who use those sites the benefit of not only authentication but sharing profile data and activity data. So we're starting to see an expansion of the value of OpenID to the end users and the websites to go beyond just authentication, but sharing personal profile information, friends, contacts, activity streams, and such. So that's starting to kind of expand the potential market for OpenID. And so one of the things that we're excited about in this conversation we're having today is as the use cases and applications and markets and industries where OpenID can be relevant increases, the amount of interaction and collaboration between other organizations will probably increase as well. As far as specific examples, I think a lot of you have seen sites now that are using either OpenID or other user-centric identity paradigms like Facebook Connect or Windows Live ID. And there are a lot, while it started out with blogging and user-generated content, now it's moving into more of professionally generated content and affinity groups. So media and entertainment applications, organizations that have that are creating content for their community, but not user-generated content. And the whole category of social networking. Obviously, for social networking to be successful, you need to have an identity tied to the interchange. And so again, OpenID is has a great protocol to facilitate that.
Great. Excellent. So